What's going on, guys? Over the last few months, I have taken a look at a couple of different Boox e-reader devices, and I gotta say, I've been pretty pleasantly surprised by these devices. I love the fact that they run Android. It makes them very, very flexible and easy to use. I don't have to worry about buying my books in a new place. I can just install whatever app I've been using and use them on those new devices. But there is a Boox device that I think really put this company on the map for a lot of people, and it's the Boox Palma. Today we're going to be looking at the sequel to that, the Palma number 2. This is basically the same device with some improved specifications. As you can see here, it's basically an Android phone with an e-ink screen, and I think that is a fairly novel idea. So, luckily, Boox has provided me with a review unit, a sample free of charge, so definitely keep that in mind going forward to review this device. So what we're going to do here is unbox the device and give my first impressions. It's going to be fairly in-depth for a first impressions video, but definitely subscribe to the channel for a full review later on. But for now, let's jump into the unboxing. All right, so we have the Palma 2, and we have what I think is some sort of like a flip case or something like that. In fact, let's go ahead and get this part out of the way first. Yeah, that is definitely what that is. Just to kind of give you an idea about the size of the device, we have a little magnetic clasp there. It looks like that's where the phone obviously is going to sit in here, sort of like a rubberized material. Help keep the device protected, and I'm guessing it could potentially operate as sort of like a kickstand or something too. We'll have to see about that as we go forward, but this is the Boox Palma 2. You can see the resolution there, 824 by 1648, kind of a weird resolution. Octa-core processor, 6 gigs of, I'm assuming, RAM, and then 128 storage. Fingerprint scanner, that's pretty cool. There's a 16 megapixel camera. That is very, very interesting as well. A 3950 milliamp hour battery, which I would guess is going to last a long time with an e-ink screen like this. And there is the device itself. Looks like there's a tab right there to pick it up and set it aside for the moment. What else do we have in the box? It looks like a USB A to C cable, and that is the only thing that is in there. There is a SIM removal tool. I'm not sure if that is for an actual SIM card. Can you use this as a phone, or is that for like an SD card? We'll have to take a look at that as well. With the paper out of the way, okay, this is pretty cool. So it has this like textured back to it. That is something I did not realize was a thing. And that's definitely gonna make this thing easier to hold on to. On the front, there's what we have. Fairly large bezels around the device, but that's not something that's really going to bother me too much. Probably power and then volume. And then on this side, we have another button. So maybe some sort of a utility key, something like that. I wonder if the fingerprint scanner is inside that power button. Looks like we do have some speakers on the bottom, microphone up top, and then there is that tray, which I guess we can go ahead and pop this out. I'm going to guess that that is just for a micro SD. So the dream of using this as your phone, probably not quite a thing yet. It does feel quite lightweight. That really doesn't seem too bad at all. Let's go ahead and power it on. I'm assuming that's the power button. Yes, indeed it was. So we have our setup process here. Of course, this is a touch screen, so we can go straight through this just like we would a normal phone. Of course, it's going to look a little bit different though. So this is a section in the setup process that is very similar to what I've seen on some of their other devices. You can have a navigation bar, or you can have these bottom gestures, and they're a little bit different than typical Android. So swiping up over here on the left will bring up your recent applications. Swiping up in the middle takes you home, and then swiping up on the right side does open up the e-ink center. You can also use a navigation bar, which will look somewhat familiar, but then there will be some other different options in there as well. Normally, I like the gestures, but I also love having the little refresh button there on the bottom as well. So we're going to go with the buttons for now. But actually, let's go back because I want to have them set up like that so that they're easier for me to reach. We also have the swipe up and down gestures to change the volume and the brightness. By default, that's turned off, but if you want to turn it on, you can do that in the settings here, and then doing this basically will change the volume and the brightness. You can also have turned on a back gesture coming from inside the screen, just like you normally have on Android. For simplicity's sake, we'll have that on as well. And just like that, we are sitting at our home screen, and this is a very Android experience. This looks like a fairly basic Android launcher, but of course, it's an e-ink screen. One thing that I find a bit odd, and maybe this is something that they could add to their setup process, is that it doesn't actually connect you to Wi-Fi during that setup process. So we're gonna have to go back home and let's jump into our settings and we'll get that set up. Very, very similar to the Wi-Fi setup, not prompting during the setup. The fingerprint scanner is very, very similar. You have to go back into the settings and do this after the fact. The case also feels like it might be getting in the way a little bit of this setup process. Or maybe it just was looking for a new part of my finger. I'm not really sure, but we do need to test this. So we'll lock the screen and see how quickly it can read. That seems pretty decent. I don't think I've got any major complaints about that. So one of the big benefits with this device is that once you get your networking set up, you can just go into the Google Play Store and install whatever application you want to install. Obviously, being an e-ink screen, when you scroll around and so forth, things are going to look a little bit stuttery, but you're not restricted in any way. If you want to use Google Play Books, you can do that and it's going to go ahead and install it just like you've seen here. Heck, if you want to install Google Gemini, you can absolutely do that as well. You have the full Google Play Store at your disposal. Now, while it absolutely is true that you can just install whatever application you want to install and get your books from there, Play Books, Kindle, whatever you want to use, there is a store app that is pre-installed on the device. As you can see here, they do have a selection of books for you to purchase and read through this application, but maybe from looking at those titles, you can tell The Adventures of Tom Sawyer, so forth and so on. These are seemingly older books. You're not getting the new releases and things like that in this application, so you're probably going to be much better served installing a third-party app. So we're going to go ahead and launch an application, and first it's going to give us this app optimization tutorial. They basically say that they are using AI to automatically optimize the apps that we have installed. If we click on the forward button, it's going to ask you, please select the primary use case for this app. Is it text, image, web page, video? And you have these options here, fast and then ultra fast. And you can see here you're going to have heavier loss with this one, but it's going to be better for video. You can also adjust the DPI right there for each app because as this is e-ink, things might be a little bit off, so you can adjust that stuff. And then what's cool is once you're in an app, you can click on that little e-ink center button and you have all of these options that are going to pop up. But the application that I wanted to check out was this CPU-Z because I wanted to see some of these specs, and I can see that this is a Qualcomm Snapdragon 750G, not the newest processor in the world, but that should be more than sufficient for what you're going to be doing on this device. When I was going around the device, we had this extra key over here, and I want to see if we can figure out what this thing actually does. So let's go into our settings, and I'm expecting, there you go, smart button, something that should make this programmable. So a short press is a full refresh. That's actually really cool. So I've got the little refresh button there, but you can also, I guess, do this by clicking the button. So if you're not super familiar with e-ink screens, the way this one is set up is that every so many presses or times that you move things on the screen, it's going to refresh. If it doesn't do that, you're going to get ghosting happening on the device, on the screen. So that kind of just wipes the slate and starts over. So you can see there's different ways to do it. You have the button, you have the actual physical button. A double click is going to open up an AI assistant. So let's try a double click and see what that actually is like. This is the Boox AI assistant. That is quite funny. Now this should be just like it was on the last Boox tablet. It's basically ChatGPT with their sort of like shell over the top of it. So not only can you customize this, you can actually select your own application. So let's set this to be Gemini. Maybe that's our AI assistant of choice. Double clicking it is going to fire up the Gemini app. Of course, I do need to download the Google app, but we can get that started as well. While that's installing, let's check out one of the strangest features, I think, on this device, and that's going to be the camera. Looks like that's on the second page. So here's the camera. I don't know how this is going to function like at all. I have no clue how this is going to work. Wow, look at that. So they're really trying to speed up their refresh rate on that. Let's try to take a picture and see what that'll look like. So there is the photo that we took, and that is definitely a photo taken on an e-reader. I went ahead and installed Google Photos so I could throw this into my Photos account. And yeah, I'm not sure how much use you're going to get out of that camera, but I mean, it's there technically. And we do now have Gemini working. Let's test this out. What can you tell me about the Boox Palma 2? And there you go. As you can see, that is working just fine, but that does remind me, we do need to test out these speakers. Definitely not the most impressive set of speakers in the world, but I think that it's good enough for listening to an ebook or something like that. If we jump back over to, thought I had it open, maybe I don't. We'll jump back into Audible, and I'll let you briefly hear what that sounds like. It's going to be totally fine.
And opened the door and went in and shut the door behind him.
For something like that. And of course, you could also use a set of Bluetooth earbuds or something like that, and that's going to be fine too. Of course, what this thing is really for is reading a book. And so this is Google Play Books. And as you can see, that's going to be just fine. Let's get a really nice close-up here. And you can see it's very, very good. These screens are absolutely phenomenal for that. Even facing towards a light where there should be a lot of glare, there really just isn't all that much. Here is my Pixel 9 Pro Fold in the exact same lighting, and you can see how much more diffuse that reflection is, and that's really, really going to help. And also, I mean, guys, I can just shine a light directly on this thing, and it stays pretty darn legible. We should be able to turn on auto rotate and then do this as well if you want to read this way. And you could probably in Google Play Books switch to a 2-page layout if you want to go that way, although I think most people are probably going to be happy to just sort of have it like this, but it is an option. Now here's a good example of something that I don't think it's doing particularly well right out of the box. This is a comic, and of course this is not a color e-ink screen either, so keep that in mind. Let's go ahead and jump into the e-ink center, and let's see if we can improve on this at all. Removing the high contrast mode, that definitely made that a little bit easier to read. And then we can also kind of boost the brightness, this light color filter a little bit. And that's helping out a bit, but for comics and things like that, it looks good, but it's going to be in black and white. So definitely keep that in mind. I keep accidentally rotating. Not bad, you're just gonna miss out on the color. Of course, one of the great things about e-ink is that the brighter it is outside, the brighter the light you're in, the easier it is to actually read the screen because it doesn't have a functioning backlight at this moment. But there actually is a backlight. Obviously, it's quite dark here, but you can turn up the backlight and this thing becomes once again usable in any lighting. And you can even change the color temperature as well. Now there is a little bit of light bleed. It might be hard to see this. A little bit of light bleed around the edges, but nonetheless, this is a really useful feature. And honestly, that might improve the experience of this sort of darker comic book as well. Yeah, that's much more easy to sort of make out to my eye. Of course, these black areas are now not really black, but this is a useful feature. Doubling back to that case really quickly before I forget, this is pretty cool. So whenever you open it up, it actually wakes up the phone. Whenever you close it, it actually puts it back to sleep. Quality of this thing looks pretty good, feels fairly nice. Kind of like the look of that as well. And if you wanted to use it as sort of a little kickstand type thing, you can absolutely do that as well. It'll fold back around. This is not too bad. Another great benefit of this thing running Android is if you don't really love their launcher, which personally I think it's kind of misplaced on this device, you can install something else. And that's why I installed Niagara Launcher. I'm only going to use a handful of applications on this device, so I can just have them on the screen with Niagara Launcher, and I think that this looks really nice and really clean. So I do want to quickly point out one issue that I have had, and I think that it is something that this thing does to try and save your battery life, but it has a very aggressive app freezing option. I have YouTube Music installed on here, and yet when you look, it's just not there because for some reason it has frozen that app. If we jump into settings, go to apps and notifications, and go down to freeze settings, by default, automatically enable freezing after installing an app is turned on. I have turned it off, and yet for some reason, it has decided to re-enable it for YouTube Music. I'm going to turn that back off. I'm going to click up here, and I'm going to say unfreeze all. Let's see if YouTube Music is now back. It is now back. So I don't know exactly why it re-enabled itself for YouTube Music, but you might want to jump into your settings and turn that feature off because, man, it is aggressive. Every app I had installed, Audible, Play Books, Chrome, it just kept freezing them over and over and over. In fact, it kept freezing Google over and over as well. Now, what's interesting, if we go back into that setting, is that Google doesn't even appear on the list to be untoggled. So what I think actually fixed Google for me was having this feature disabled. I uninstalled Google and I reinstalled it, and that seemed to fix it for Google. So again, just keep this in mind. I think that the most interesting question about this device is, who is it for? Why would you want an e-reader that is the size and shape of a smartphone instead of something like some of their other e-readers, which have these larger screens, a larger canvas to get your reading done on? I think that the obvious answer is that we are just really used to smartphone-shaped devices. We're used to putting these devices into our pocket or into a bag, something like that, and that does make this thing just more familiar and easier to carry around. It's also a lot lighter than those other devices, which means it's pretty easy to use with one hand. So what you end up with is a device that is much, much easier to just take with you anywhere, but it still does have that primary advantage of an e-reader, which is a screen that looks great in any lighting condition. Super bright light, maybe you're on your lunch break and you're sitting in your car getting some reading done, lots of light coming through the window. Guess what? No problem at all. Maybe you're in a darker scenario. You're sitting in your living room at night and the lights are dim and you're getting some reading done there. Well, guess what? You can just crank that backlight up as high as you need it to be and continue reading quite happily in that lighting condition as well. What you have here is an exceptionally flexible, portable e-reading device that the more I think about it, the more I think it makes a lot of sense. Maybe you can put a little twist on the saying, but the best e-reader is the one you have with you. And this, I think, is going to be one of, if not the easiest to keep with you at all times. So guys, right now the Boox Palma 2 is up for order for $279. Now, I did mention this is not, I know it seems like a full review, but this is not going to be called a full review because I just haven't had enough time with the device. And I actually have something kind of special in mind for the review, so be sure and subscribe for that video coming a bit later. In the meantime, I will put a link in the description down below, which I think will be an affiliate link, which means if you click the link and you make a purchase, it will help support the channel. So that is something to keep in mind going forward. Again, thanks to Boox for sending this lovely e-reader out for me to take a look at. Guys, I'll see you on the next one. And until next time, stay nerdy, my friends.